Hayley, would you like to start us off?
Yeah. Should we? Okay.
Yeah. Should we stand up?
Right. It's official now. I've stood up. So, what we're going to talk about today are tools for creative engagement. And the thing is that they're quite different. They look quite different between the work that Miriam does and the work that Laura and I have done. But the thread that kind of runs through what the three of us do is that for us, tools help us to engage communities through creative methods and enable others to become co-designers with us and potentially co-researchers as well. So I'm going to give the floor directly to Miriam.
I'm going to try and see if I remember to from the beginning, slideshow. Oh yeah. Sorry. It shows how much I use PowerPoint. Right, and is there a clicker? Yeah,
yellow pen.
This. Perfect. Oh, I guess I get the right one. Okay. Oh, I'm going to stand up here. Right. Okay, so my PhD has a title now. It's actually called Sketching as a Support Mechanism for the Design and Application of Shape-Changing Interfaces, which is great, but essentially it's... So I press the button last day. Oh. Yeah, sorry. But essentially it's about sort of this burning desire to get people involved in what's actually going on in research, because a lot of the time researchers are working in silos, they're in like high tower of academia, and there's a lot of normal people out there. And Lancaster actually does it better than other places I've been from my other degrees. Like they have the shop in town, they have like public events, they have speaker series. That's the fantastic thing of Charlie Adelaide earlier this year, which was great. But yeah, so more about what I'm doing. Okay, so this is quite lengthy, but in terms of engagement, I wanted to do something that was really accessible, that pretty much everyone can do, even if they say they can't, because everyone can just make a mark on paper, they can write, they can draw, they can even do a handprint, anything they feel like. But sketches are a really good way of bridging the gap between researchers and the public, because they're something everyone can use. So yes, I originated psychology at University of Edinburgh about 1 million years ago. Then I went to do visual communication and specialised in illustration, which was fantastic. And then I joined Highwire at Lancaster, which was an MRes plus 3 years PhD, which has just come to an end, and they're no longer paying me for that, which is a shame. But I have a job, so that's good. So I was very like the traditional arts, etching, painting, things that weren't computerised at all. In fact, I actually originally wanted to do a PhD in fine art, and it's sort of fine art that hates computing, and so it's gone full circle. So some of my sketches are more about social commentary. So these are things I did in reaction to world events. On the left, we've got the Hebdo shooting, and on the right, we've got Barack Obama being elected, which seems like a really, really long time ago now. But also sketching is useful for recording moments in time, like if your boyfriend falls asleep on holiday and you're looking out the window, and it's a really nice way. It doesn't have to be precise, it doesn't have to be photographic, it's just a good way of thinking through things. And also it's seen in newspapers and books and things. So these are when I used to work in publishing, one of the many, many jobs. So how do we bring art into HCI? So some people have already attempted this. You have art displays, you have fantastic, sort of very fluid sculptures that move. You get people looking at drawing on tablets and how that can work. But I really like old school sketching, and I want to see how that can have a place in HCI. So one of the main things is thinking through ideas. So, human-computer interaction. Sorry if you got over the out of context. Yeah, so the focus is meant to be on the human, and sometimes it gets lost, and it seems to be all about the computer, which is why I quite enjoy messing things up. So you've got Alessi's lemon squeezer, things that are like napkins and a flash of inspiration, and Feynman, who is notorious for writing fabulous equations, also drawing naked ladies. So something else that a lot of people do in HCI is sketchnoting, but that also expands to other disciplines. So it's a really good way of remembering better what you've heard, engaging with the talk and not falling asleep, and also it's a really fun thing to use as a way of creating a dialogue with the person who's been talking. So often I'll draw a portrait of the person and tweet it, and then they get excited and then they want a copy of it. And it's a really nice way of actually meeting new researchers as well. Okay, so this guy I came across in my master's year. It's another interesting way of using sketching as a sort of method of inquiry and documentation. So this guy was based in Glasgow College of Art, and he goes into places like blocks of flats that are going to be blown up or old bingo halls, and he creates these maps, and they're full of like little conversations of people who remember the place and the space, and there's little things like little rubbish bins or like, oh, only one of these toilets still works, and he creates these fantastic places. And it's all rooted in sketching. Okay, so yeah, so that's what I've been saying. Sketching is really immediate. It can be adapted. It's not like you're going to produce a sketch and someone's going to say, well, I don't think that's right. But the sketch doesn't have to be right. It can just be what you think at the time. So it's good for memory. It's good for getting your points across, especially in terms of language barriers. Sometimes drawing a picture is a lot easier than getting Google Translate out, I think. Yeah, and something else that's fun about it is the idea that pictures are universal. So we still understand what cavemen were doing thousands of years ago. Millions? Thousands? Hundreds of thousands?
Hundreds of thousands.
When the cavemen were doing the caveman thing. Obviously not in history. Yeah, so sometimes I mix up sketching and drawing. Drawing is, you know, the practice of making marks as much as sketching, but sketching can also be other things. It can be an algorithm. It can be a comedy sketch, it could be physical sketching. So sketching doesn't have to be about drawing, it could just be about making some notes, you know, even post-it notes. It could be about acting out a little scene. I mean, I should use it in the most traditional way, but it's important to think about getting people to do little things that aren't traditional sketching but might be useful. Anyway, as I said earlier, everybody in this room can draw, even if they say they can't. Apparently, there's been psychology stuff that says it's develops in the same way as language, and if we can all, well, if we can speak, we can probably draw, and even if we can't speak, we can probably draw. There's elephants who can draw. So anyone who says they can't draw, I really don't believe it. And that kind of belief helps when you're engaging with people, because you go, oh, could you just try? And I'm like, can you just draw a stick man or something? And then they go, oh, no, I can draw a stick man. And I think out of 50 participants in my final study, only 2 people refused to draw and made notes instead. But those notes still form part of a narrative in a storyboard, so yeah, it's good. You just have to kind of encourage people. Yeah, there's developmental stuff I used to love when I was doing psychology. So you get children who start off drawing a blob, and that's mummy and daddy, and then they get stick arms, and then you get sausage fingers that come out, and then you get lines of sky, and then the sky comes down. No, but all children pretty much develop drawing in the same way, and it's really exciting to see how it works, and then looking at the parallels. And unfortunately, I think there's a great TEDx talk, no, not TEDx, it was a Royal College of Art animation by Ken Robinson.
Yes.
That's the one, isn't it? And it's beautifully done, but it's talking about why the art's important. And they're cutting them, and they're still cutting art and drawing and music. And to be fair, these are the things that support our more sort of structured learning and sort of give us inspiration. And actually, people who do these things do better in their other subjects too. So I'm all about them making people draw. Yeah, so this is one of the problems. So everyone probably drew some great pictures when they were little of their parents and their dog, but we don't get to do it all the time, and maybe we don't have time to do it. But I mean, I think one of the really fun things about the project I've been doing is people going, oh, I've forgotten how much fun it was drawing, and they spent hours creating these beautiful works. So. Okay, so actual research. So this is something I did right at the beginning. I decided that I wanted to look at shape-changing spaces because I was really stuck. Someone says you can do whatever you want, and then you go, oh, okay. So I thought, well, how can I bring drawing into something that's quite computational? And by some sheer piece of luck, I got to know the people who ran St. Nick's Arcade, and they gave me a shot, just like that. I mean, it was quite bizarre. But they said, here's an empty unit, do what you like with it, and we set up a project. Got posters in the windows saying creative engagement experiment, and come and, like, you know, think of new ideas and see technology. And we stole a lot of the stuff from Leica and put it in the shop. It is back in Leica now, just for the record. Yeah, it was a really good time. So, and we got a lot of people through the door. Some people were terrified by the fact they were being asked to take part in research. Some people came in because they were curious. Some people came in to steal high wire mugs. It was a really interesting situation, but one of the great things was people were like, oh, it's actually really nice to be asked. No one ever asked us to get involved in research. You know, it all happens over here, and we're over here. And it was just a great way of actually not only collecting data, but also, you know, getting people involved in what the university is doing. Yeah, so we had 74 participants in all. I think I made a pilot as well. Sabrina might be one of my original participants. And they came up with 330 ideas for shape-changing interface.
Miriam, can I just ask a question about that? So did you, when you were inviting or seeking for participants, was that like an open public call, and where was it advertised?
It wasn't really advertised. I put some posters up before we started, and then I would just open up the shop in the morning, and I would just sit in the shop for 9 for about 10 till 4.
So whoever comes there.
Yeah, because I mean, there's.
And where was the shop located?
It was, if you know where Boots and Next are. So actually Next, it was opposite Next, in the inside of the St. Nick's Arcade.
Yeah.
So it was a really good
centre of Lancaster.
Yeah, right in the, and it was a really, really prime position. I think it's been all sorts of things like a card shop and stuff recently. But yeah, I couldn't probably do that project now. So we've given us space. Yeah, also, sorry, shape-changing interfaces for the uninitiated are sort of tangible computers where the screen deforms or moves or bends, and often it'll be self-animated. So you're looking at, imagine if like a lump of clay was a computer. Which is quite far-fetched, but that's what they ultimately want to do. Yes, so we had 55% of people chose to draw. So I wasn't forcing people to draw at this stage. I said, you can draw if you like. And I gave some pens and paper, and some people made copious notes. These are some great ones. So the sound to touch suit is a suit for blind people. So it can like hear oncoming cars or noises, and it will, you know, push you or make it, you know, the shape will change against you as a wearable, and then you know something's coming and you can get out of the way. Some of them were more macabre, like the stabby sword in the bottom corner. Yeah, that's right.
Can I just ask, what kind of question did you ask them? Like when you asked them to draw, what did you ask them?
Sorry, I think I missed that bit out. Yes, so we invited them in to look at a prototype we had, which was made of bi-directional actuators, so things that go up and down in sequence, and they got to play with that. And then I said, well, I want you to think of as many ideas as you can for what you might do with a shape-changing computer. And I also had some posters which I'd drawn with diagrams of like different things you could vary, like size or width and shape or speed, and like give them an idea that imagine, what would you do if you had physically dynamic computational materials or devices. Sorry, I'm being just conscious of time. And we also had children involved, so I got ethics permission to get kids to do this as well. So that's the one on the bottom right, the 9-year-old boy. You took the idea of the actuators and to use them to walk on the ceiling with a special helmet, which is quite fun. I think that's one of my favourites. Wait, is this real? I don't know. Anyway, this one's looking at physical telepresence, which someone in MIT has actually been looking at. They've had 2 bases of actuated screens which move up and down, and they've been having one person's hands represented in one remotely, which is quite fun. So this is one of the ideas that was mirrored by the ideas the public were having, which means they're probably on the right track. Although I don't know why swords are still coming up, but obviously the public are very excited about that. Don't know why that's jumped up there. I think that says Rasmussen, if anyone wants the reference. So a researcher called Mike and Rasmussen decided to look at designers' use of sketching, which kind of, interestingly enough, mirrors onto the kind of things that people were doing in the study in terms of looking at the narrative. So you ended up with not only like static drawings, but you ended up with sequential drawings that show the change in shape over time. And these were done by designers and published in Kai. So that's Rasmussen, 2016. Okay, so I then got really excited about drawing myself. So I hadn't drawn anything, and everyone else was drawing. So they said, why don't you go away and draw something? So I decided I'd draw pictures of a computer game that didn't exist that was based in shape change, but then it very quickly became quite a huge, epic document, because I actually had to work out how the game worked. It wasn't enough to just draw pictures, but by drawing, the process helps you think through how you might go about playing something. And that was the cover that was in European Academy of Design, so that's good. So I managed to publish something in computing first, and then went to design, which is quite nice, because it's quite difficult sometimes to mix the two up. Anyway, so then I decided to have a go at thinking through the ideas in a bit more depth. So I'd take one of the ideas from the public and sort of elaborate on it. So this was one about shape-changing keys, and looking at the practicalities of it. Would you actually want to carry around something that was that heavy and big? And could it be hacked? Does it need recharging? So all these things come up when you're making sketches. Another way that was, this was a little bit more random, this was based on the design fiction. This was actually looking at making comics, which I think something Natasha is very familiar with. So I was asked to do this for a paper that Paul Coulton and Leica was doing, and just write a story about the idea of digital empathy and dating. So we did this, and it ran away with us, and I think the Daily Mail picked it up with a very misleading headline that said the future of dating is here. What if your date knew what you were thinking? And people, but then they get to the end and say that's not really real. So it's good, but it's the idea of actually having an iPhone attachment that can look at pupil dilation and things like that. And tell if you like someone, tell if you're reacting to them in a positive way. This story involved a very unsuccessful date, but the guy really wanted a second date, so he got his flatmate to pretend to be on the dating site, and then she falls for him instead, and they live happily ever after. But yes, it's also loosely based on Blade Runner. It's quite complicated. If anyone wants to look at it, there are copies around, and I think Natasha's got some on the website as well. So anyway, sketching is great. It is actually relevant, it is useful. There are lots of researchers saying why it's still relevant. Like Goldschmidt has written a paper just this year, basically saying, does it still have a place in today's world? And yes, it does. It's fantastic. So you've got conferences like Graphic Medicine, so that's a really big conference, and people are using comics to talk about issues, communicate to children, communicate to all sorts of researchers, because sometimes this stuff's really complex, and telling the patient stories, talking about how the data works is really important. And in HCI, people are really engaging with it. So there's a guy here, Tommy Dykes on the right. He's looking at sort of the Google Maps thing for older people. So they made a comic about their experiences, whereas the one on the left is an actual comic paper that starts off looking very normal in the abstract and then turns into a comic, looking at the value of narrative in computing. So yeah, people are open to this. This is, people might recognise XKCD. So the value of that is, that actually explained to me for a few panels what Heartbleed virus was, which was very helpful. Change your passwords immediately. And on the right was a Google Chrome launch that Scott McCloud, one of the great comic artists, did. And it really does get your point across in very few pictures. If someone gave me a document that basically just told me about Google Chrome, I would never read it. But that's actually engaging. Okay, so in HCI itself, there are people who are investigating storyboarding for engagement. So the guys at the top, Trong and Aboud, they've got some guidelines for this. So these are things that other people can use. So for my final study, I actually thought, 3 to 6 frames is the optimum. Let's give them a sheet with 6 frames. These are just useful to tell people. If people are struggling, it sometimes helps to give them a few hints. We also run a tutorial with researchers at Computer-Human Interaction. They swap it around for the conference. Basically getting researchers to learn to draw right from scratch, right from drawing lines and drawing triangles to making storyboards, looking at chest-mounted wearables or and things that they were actually interested in, and then trying to explain how that's going to be useful. And we're going to run a number of these, hopefully, at CHI coming up this year, which is in Montreal, so I really hope we're doing that. We're going to run a workshop with researchers that was a bit more open-ended, so this one was at DIS this year, and looking at basically how we're already using sketching in HCI, what are our best practices for teaching, what can we do next, how can we actually get drawn image in publications more accepted instead of being a punishment, because in some places it says each picture you have, you lose 250 words. And if your whole paper is only 4,000 and you want to put some pictures in, you're pretty much screwed, so great. This is something that's going into my PhD. I should have finished by now, but I haven't. So now I was looking at scenarios, so taking the idea of the narrative and the timelines and looking at shape-changing pets. Let's go back to that, that's more fun. In case you want to finish reading it. This is looking at sort of an assisted shape-changing pet for the elderly. And it's great fun, but this is very kind of half-based in current work in scenarios and design, and half-based in design fiction and future stuff. But it came from, I took ideas from the future work sections of a few papers and then made them into comics to show how they might actually work. But yeah, so back to shape change itself. So this is what I ended up doing. So I classified all shape-changing prototypes. So they are into their most basic material aspects, which make them a lot easier to communicate. So got things like liquid ones, bendable, foldable. And it makes it a lot easier once you know what they're made of to then talk to the public about that. So I combined sketching with low fidelity prototypes, which essentially are things that I didn't have to program because I'm essentially a designer, not an awesome programmer. But it gave people the opportunity to sort of play with the materials and think about what if that material was a computer. And then they had to generate some ideas, much like the first study, and then draw some diagrams, say how would this work, does it plug in, how big is it, useful things like that. I think the lovely Natasha drew the one on the right, which is very kind of her. But yeah, so people really did engage. I said, please draw something, and no matter who they were, where they came from, we got plenty of drawings, and we got some absolutely beautiful storyboards. This one's especially good. This was a guy who graduated some years ago that had come to play some pool, and happened to be in the department, and I said, oh, we'll have a go. And he spent a very, very long time doing this. It's about a spy who's trying to save the world from lizard men. And his computer can turn into a liquid from the computer, so he drinks the computer to prevent the data being lost and the lizard men, which is kind of cool. And this one's absolutely beautiful. It's been pristinely kept done. This is by an English literature student called Inez. And she spent an hour and a half with me, and it's one of the most lovely ideas. I mean, there's meaning in it. We can get a lot of ideas about this thing is portable. It needs to be, it needs to be soft like a real cat. It's just really amazing how much you can get out of a simple drawing in terms of generating requirements for what you actually might do in research. I think I've come to the end, Hayley. I don't want to overrun onto your time.
No, you're all good.
Yeah. So once we had all these amazing diagrams and storyboards from the second study I did, which had 50 people, which was instead of just popping up a shop, it was mainly involved in non-computing people, because it was very important to get people who weren't involved already in our research to then get some ideas to feed back into research. And the drawing kind of really helped with that, because if you ask someone for an idea, I have an idea for a thing, then you don't know much about it, but if they start drawing sketches of it, they start putting it into the context, then you can really get an idea of how this thing works and what it is. And then the idea is, I really want to turn this into a comic itself, and all the stories, collate them, and maybe get some money to actually do that. Hopefully university might, I think they have engagement, money somewhere. But yeah, the idea was then that this would become an object that I could share both with the research community and give back to the people and the participants. It's something that you might then create a dialogue between researchers and the public. Yes, there you go. That's me. We can do questions at the end together, I think, which might be interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry if it was a bit like,
Thank you so much. I just want to add that if you want to have a closer look at references and also drawings, we will share the PowerPoint with everyone, and we can also we will have the recording. So, is that correct? People can contact you for.
Yeah, it's on the Edwards web page.
Yeah, so it will be the video recording will be on our web page, and I just want to make a very brief comment that I really enjoyed engaging in the process, because I was one of the participants in the study when Miriam asked me, and I was quite fascinated by the whole idea of imagining scenarios and then drawing them in any way about a possible product, something that can be created. So the idea is for researchers in any discipline, if we want a final product and if we want to think through producing something that can be shared then with the community and also involve the community, so the participants, then the idea is to, that's how I understood it, but Miriam can talk about it, is actually to engage the community and take something from the community, the ideas that are shared, and then bring back to the community and actually understand how the people in the community think. So for me that was fascinating.
But also about actually getting the researchers to build products people actually want and need, and are going to fulfill some kind of gap, because at the moment it's very technology-driven, hardware-based stuff that's going on, which is amazing, and the technology just blows your mind, but actually it lacks a lot of direction, and they build one thing, then they move on to the next, and then the next. They never really see it through, and that's one of the problems that's been seeing. It's very incremental stuff, and it's very throwaway, and if there was actually a clear direction where it was going through maybe some kind of end user perspective, then it's more likely that it's going to go somewhere.
Miriam, what I understand you're doing, Miriam is collecting all of the drawings and then reinterpreting them, and then she will draw her interpretation of all the sketches, and then she will publish that. So that she's able then to share it, with researchers, but also with the community, because it will be more accessible to wider public.
There's also great journals like the Comics Journal that actually people are publishing comics formats that you can. Self-publishing is also a great opportunity.
Oh.
Come in. No?
Come in. Yeah, there is a chair there.
No, alas not. Nothing obviously so interesting. I'm tempted to stay. Let's go for a third.
I'm really interested in public engagement. I got really frustrated by the lack of participants in most of these studies. You just get a few undergrads to do it, and then that's like proof that this thing works, that it's a thing, and I just thought it shouldn't be the case. You need more people, and you need real people that have never even been to the university, and they've got some really interesting perspectives. And a lot of them were health-related and assisted living. The vast majority were entertainment-based, has to be said. Everyone was computer games that they could actually touch and engage with. But there's a lot of good people out there with a lot of good ideas that don't ever get heard. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to pass it over to Hayley, because they've got lots of amazing things to say in a very structured way, I think. Mine's been a bit of a...
Oh, talk it up.
Yeah.
All right. Right. So, thank you so much, Miriam. That was really interesting. As I said, Miriam is doing something a little bit different to the kind of work we're doing. So she's thinking specifically about how sketching and the act of sketching can be used as a tool together with other people who may or may not themselves have a creative background, or be part of the academic institution and potentially get involved and contribute to the research. So the work that we've been doing is designing lots of different tools that engagement practitioners use. So a little bit about that. So we are concerned in Leapfrog, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment, about co-designing tools for creative engagement. Your left.
I love my left. It's just so that we can see the full screen.
No problem. So we are concerned with co-designing tools for creative engagement. What do we mean by that? Well, creative engagement is something that an engagement professional, so say someone, for instance, who works for a public service provider or voluntary service provider, they're working with communities and families and individuals who are interacting with those services, and they're making joint decisions about the future of that service, whether it's in that person's life individually, so say for instance in the NHS, or something that's far more, that has a far wider reach, sort of throughout a whole community. And the engagement practitioner who does this work, they might choose to use creative methods to do that work. How is that different to other kinds of engagement, where, for instance, you might have kind of assessment forms and questionnaires and things like that? Well, this is a bit more open-ended than that. So it's about facilitating open-ended discussion. It's about eliciting people's hopes and their fears and their values and dreams and concerns. It could be about generating ideas. It could be as well about, so not unlike what you were discussing, Miriam, with the sketching, it could be about an opportunity to do and learn through the act of participating. So it's not just you contribute, it's not just someone being asked to kind of give over everything they think, there's something that they can potentially get out of having been involved. It can as well inform practical action and decision making, which is the whole point of engagement, and enable, importantly, people to express themselves with their own voice, in their own way, and for you to be able to collect a number of different voices. So it's not about converging all on one single point. Happy with that as a definition? Okay. Ooh!
I've got this.
Magic.
So as I said before, I've worked for 5 years in Imagination in Lancaster on various research projects, and the thread that's gone through those has been tools. So there's been tools for knowledge exchange, there's been tools for academics to do engagement for their research, and there's been tools for co-design. The hexagon cards that you can see in this picture is probably the tool that's been used the most out of those projects, and a lot of people in the university have seen it and used it. And the idea of that is that it allows people to connect together ideas in different directions and also move them around, maybe make sculptures like you can see there.
And my experience, so I'm also a designer from my background, and I got involved with a project before Leapfrog called Proud, and that was working with Leon Cruikshank at Imagination Lancaster and Gemma Coop, and what Proud was doing was exploring co-design, the co-design, so collaborative design of space and services and products, and so how you involve many stakeholders, many community members in the design of these kind of large and complex projects. And one of the outputs from this program of work was working with an engagement professional at Lancaster City Council, who did a lot of work with people in parks and public spaces. And she wanted some tools to help her do this work. Very little time, so she's heavily time constrained, resource constrained, financial constrained. So what's something that she can literally just grab and go and do the work in a way that was eye-catching and would engage people in different ways. So this was one of the tools that we designed together. These were called zoners, and you could literally just whack them in the ground and use them as both signage and also attach comments and drawings and all sorts of things to them. And then there was kind of icons, so people could also do it as a way of wayfinding and so on. That's an example. All right, Leapfrog. So that work, as I say, led on to the project that we have opening with Cindy over there as well. So Leapfrog is an AHRC three-year project. Sorry, an AHRC funded 3-year project in Imagination Lancaster. And what we are doing is co-designing tools for creative engagement with engagement professionals throughout Lancashire, as well throughout the Highlands and Islands with our partner institution, Glasgow School of Art.
This is a screenshot from our website if you want to, well, I say our, I don't work on it anymore. the website here, if you want to have a look at the different things that we've got on there, including tools.
So I should say, by the way, that those tools do go onto the website. The tools are totally free and are ready for you to download. There are low barriers to use, so it's just printed A4, A3 forms that you can customise, because they're often kind of interactive PDFs. Anyway, so who did we co-design with?
We've co-designed on Leapfrog with a lot of different groups of people. So there's been Lancashire County Council, various professionals there who work with young people who are librarians. We've worked with Blackburn with Darwen Council, Derbyshire County Council, Adult Safeguarding Board, and other organisations that link in with public provision. So, for example, Health Watch, NHS. Did you mention co-design before?
I have mentioned it. We're going to talk a little bit about it again, aren't we?
Yep.
That's all right.
So we move on to the design process. This is the double diamond, which is a widely used and referenced representation of the design process that's from the Design Council. And you can see here that it has discover, define, develop and deliver, which are 4 phases on the diagram. And the idea is that design often start with a problem and move outwards to explore the possibilities before closing in, and then going back out again to prototype and test things, sometimes with sketches and models and such, before delivering the solution. And this is a this is a diagram that we often refer to because we think that it's a useful way to guide people who are not designers through a co-design process.
Yeah. So just to quickly go back to the other slide. So what's interesting about this model, like all models, is it's really flat and really clean looking. But actually, what kind of happens? So the people here who work in design will know that this kind of just is really, really messy, and it just goes backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards because you're constantly doing this negotiation between sort of prototyping, trying to figure out the different decisions you have to make in terms of your resources and your constraints, and also meeting the needs of the brief. So it's messier than it's far messier than that would suggest.
But it's widely agreed that this is a good representation across different design disciplines.
And so the reason why we show that to you is because when you're co-designing, when you're taking a large number of stakeholders through a design process in such a way that they are an integral part of the creative decision-making process from start to finish, it means that as designers, what we're doing is creating frames and structures, and scaffolds is a term that's commonly used, for non-designers to interact with in order for them to have a meaningful experience at every stage of the design process. So for instance, when we were working with some professionals who do a lot of youth work, one of the challenges that existed inside of this particular project was we were thinking about the translation process. They have young people that they're working with who have one kind of language. And then they also have the language of policies and reports and official speak. And how do those two disparate spaces come together and find meaning in each other? And it's not just about the language, it's about the timing. We're talking about young people. For them, weeks and months is a long time. But over the course of the creation of a policy, well, that could be years. They'll stop being young people. So how do all these issues get translated, and how do engagement professionals who are involved in being a kind of interlocutor in that space, how do they manage that? And so we were trying to, with the idea of trying to design tools to help them communicate and translate those things with the young people that they're working with, we first had to look at the process that they already go through in their work. So this was one of the stages of designing, where they were scoping out, okay, what is the work that they do? And then we were bringing tools that we were designing for that co-design process into that exploration. So they were overlaying that on top of what they were saying their process was, and saying, okay, here's a translation point, there's a translation point. So they're not necessarily complex things, but it's just thinking about the kinds of interactions that will help people think differently and frame their reflections on their own work, as an example.
Yes, it's just a card with an arrow on it, and then it's got a few prompts on there that they fill in, and that just gives us a little bit more information than we would otherwise get.
Yeah.
So here's one of the probably the most successful projects on Leapfrog, which was working with young people, and it won an award that was from the British Youth Council. And what we did was we worked with 12 young people who were in care, on the edge of care, or who were young carers. We brought in an excellent facilitator who many of you might know, Dee Hennessy, and she helped us to work with these young people and facilitate discussions to find out basically what things really annoy them about when they communicate with youth workers and the other adults about what they need. And we were aiming to design tools with them that could help them have better conversations. This here is part of a newspaper that we put we had 5 tools that came out of the project, and we put them into a newspaper called The Inspirer. And the newspaper documented the story of the workshops that we'd have with the young people, which included a 2-day residential weekend with them. And it also included little stories about how they would use the tools, what they thought of them, and how they'd come about, and suggestions for how other youth workers might use them in their organisations.
So we've said the word tools an awful lot, and you might be wondering what it is we mean by tools. Because what we're saying is that on the one hand, we were co-designing tools that other engagement practitioners could go and use when they're engaged in communities. But then we were also using the tools that we were designing as part of the co-design process. That was kind of happening in parallel. But for the tools that we're sharing, specifically the tools that we were designing with people, we've got a working definition. And the first part of that definition is that tools are there to do different jobs. So they can potentially help people generate ideas, organise and synthesise ideas. Tools might help people to reflect and to evaluate and to analyse. And it might help them to exchange knowledge with other people. What I think is quite interesting is that when you, through my own research, when I started to look at what engagement practitioners are really doing with tools, in a way that you don't often tend to see in literature, because it just kind of, tools just go out there into the world, and then there are kind of all sorts of assumptions about what happens. But what you tend to find is people talking about tools in ways in which they're actually bringing together different tasks at the same time. They perform different tasks, and they enable people to do different things in parallel. So that could be about transmitting knowledge or transmitting learning, or it could as well as generating ideas for something. The other ways in which we are defining tools is that they frame and document a process, that they are transferable, so you can be used in different contexts, potentially used to do different jobs, the same thing, that they draw on theory and inform good practice for engagement practitioners, but very, very importantly, they require skill for use. So one of the issues that comes about with tools, so say for instance something like the experience-based co-design toolkit that went out through the King's Fund and the NHS, that a paper was written on that by, I've forgotten the author's name, but it was Gould.
It's Donetto.
Yeah. So it was back in 2015. I can get the reference later for you. But one of the things that they cited in that paper is that there was a thinking going on that if people simply use the tools, that engagement had taken place, and that people had therefore participated. No, that isn't the case. You have to have the skill and the right intention, and a sense of what it is you're going to do when you engage, and what it is you intend to get out of that. And that the tool, much like a physical tool, like a hammer, is there to help you do a better job of what it is you intend to do. It helps to bring accuracy and stronger impact. Other ways in which we are thinking of tools are as being low cost with low barriers to use. Because people have, not only are people kind of resource deprived, but also there's an argument there. There's an argument for how communities participate and what is unthreatening to get involved with. And also they're a loose structure, so meaning that there's something that could potentially be quite generic to look at, but that builds meaning through use, and that the people using the tools add to that in a way that's localised. Okay.
Some examples of tools. This one that we've got up here on the screen is called Topic Tally. It's in the newspaper that I mentioned before. It's a good example of a tool because it's quite easy to understand. It's very simple, and it was designed by one of the young people. So the idea is that over here there is space for the young person to put what they definitely want to talk about when they meet with a youth worker, and things that if there is time, it would be good to talk about. And on the other side, there's space for the youth worker to do the same. And the idea is then that they have a discussion, and down the middle goes what they have agreed on together, and hopefully that means that they have a better conversation as a result of using this tool and this structure. And as we mentioned before, it's not a blank page. It's got something on there just to help them, just to prompt them along and to create conversation. This is a tool called Everybody, and this was designed with the engagement practitioners at Lancaster City Council, and they discussed a problem where sometimes when they have public consultation, you get a child coming along with an adult and they're putting down what they think they should put down, what their opinion isn't. It's more the adult that's with them, or it could be peers who are influencing them. So this tool is about finding out what they think should happen in terms of their feelings and their actions, but it also it folds up and goes into an envelope which has a little avatar sticker on it which represents them, and it's less personal, and it means that they can write what they feel. This tool is the topic tally tool, which is probably one of the most used leapfrog tools. It's been used hundreds of times by Healthwatch in Blackburn, for example. And this is also a very simple one, which is something that you've probably come across before, where you arrange things going from most important in the middle and going outwards to least important. But what we found with this tool in particular is that it's really good for creating comparisons, and it's particularly easy for it to then be transferred to a report to influence things like policy. This tool is called ComStretcher. It was designed with librarians in the county, and the idea is you can't really see the scale of it there, but it's a big poster, and it's prompting people to come up with different ways to engage with communities, and they have to fill in these bubbles, and you've got to fill in all of the bubbles and move outwards. And the reason it's called ComStretcher is because it's stretching you to think more ideas and to be more creative. And then over here is a tool that goes alongside it to help you then focus back in. That's called ComFocus. So that's like a plan that you keep, and there's a little bit for evaluation at the bottom just to say how the idea's gone.
All right. So there are a few really lovely case studies that are emerging from Leapfrog at the moment from our partners who are going away to use the tools. One particularly, I guess, important one for us.
Yep.
is an example of where target control was used by some youth workers who were key workers to a young 5-year-old girl who had recently lost her parents. So here you can see target control again. This is actually kind of what it looks like when you first receive it. And the way in which those key workers worked with this young girl, so there was a dispute that was forming. Now that she'd lost her parents, there was a dispute that was forming over who was going to be her legal guardian. And her key worker, sorry.
You're right.
Yeah. Hang on a minute. There's the thing. One of the aunties of this young girl was making a case for definitely being her guardian. However, the key worker sat down with this 5-year-old girl and had a long conversation. It's very child-centric. This is all part of the work that they do. And they use this tool to start to map out and visualise the people in this girl's life. So she was thinking about her family and her friends, and it was a broad discussion. The result of using that tool, what transpired was that this particular auntie who was making the case of being her legal guardian did not figure on that map. And that then served as the evidence to stop her from becoming the legal guardian, and it was then another family member who became the legal guardian of her child. Now that's a huge success for us, because it's about, it's of course what's at the heart of that is excellent working on the part of the youth worker. We're not claiming to be great at youth work. We don't necessarily know those things, but what that tool helped them to do was the work they already know how to do, but made it clearer, made it visual, made it child-centric, and ultimately helped them to make the right decision jointly.
What is written
So here, he put it as family I want lots of contact with, so that was right in the middle. Family I want some contact with, and then the red circle is family I want less contact with.
And the tool as well, if you download it from the website, you can change the headings on it. It's an interactive PDF. So the youth worker was then able to take this and put those headings in. Those aren't ones that we were giving them, prescribing to them. And then they've chosen to use these shapes on here and put Grandad in the middle. Yeah. Arrange it like that.
Yeah, I mean, this for me as well is something that is, again, it goes back to this idea of the tools being a loose structure that then gathers meaning through use, through combining the tool with other things that youth worker uses, like the sticky notes and the people shapes and things like that. They've then created something that is useful in that moment for working with the person that they're working with. Yeah,
That's fine.
Yeah. So, well, we added this slide in, but you kind of know what we're doing now, I guess. But
you want to add a little bit about what your PhD is actually
I guess
about?
I could. Yeah. So I am, as Leapfrog draws to a close, so does my PhD, and my own research. So my own research dovetails with the work that we've been doing with Leapfrog, and my particular research interest is about how engagement practitioners go away and adapt those tools. So what does adaptation mean, and what is happening when they're adapting tools, and why does that happen? And then ultimately, how can we, as tool designers, support more of that in a better way? Yeah, thesis coming to computer screen near you soon. I think.
And I'm a long way away from that because I started my PhD in October, which is last month, and it's different from Leapfrog, but I'm hoping to carry on some of the things that I've got skills and experience in. It's on a program called Transformation Northwest, which is also HRC funded, and it's about the contribution of the creative industries to industry in the northwest of England. So I've been started researching things like social innovation and design and innovation and things like that as a starting point, but I don't know where I'm going yet with that.
And so we do have one last slide. I realised I did a terrible job of signposting this right at the beginning. I was like, yeah, we're going to talk to you about tools. But what I should have said at the beginning was that we wanted to end with some tips for engaging people creatively in research. And Miriam, if you'd like to come up as well. This is come up.
So we
and could you talk through all of them now?
No, we sat down together and thought about what works for us when we've been working with people directly.
Yeah.
So the first one is, what's the value to the communities you work with? So particularly we find with people in the public sector, they're just really busy and they don't have a lot of time, so you have to make it worth their while. And it doesn't have to be that you have to pay people and you have to. Food is also helpful, but it's just that we've been through Leapfrog said you're going to get some tools at the end that you're going to co-design, so you're going to have ownership over those, and they'll hopefully make your jobs easier, and that's the benefit to them.
Yeah, I should add to that one as well. It doesn't necessarily just have to be about that. So the project that I was involved with before Leapfrog, I started off in as a volunteer, and one of the ways in which they enticed me was through pizza, lots of pizza. So that also works too.
But also, as well as what's of value to them, it's like making them feel that what they're doing is valued and that what they're helping. And people actually really do want to get involved and help with research because it's not something you get to do every day.
Yeah. So number 2, make it convenient for them. So in our experience through both tool co-designing as well as sort of tool sharing events and things like that, it doesn't always necessarily make sense to think, right, I'm going to put on a really big event in the university and everyone's going to come to it. That is not the case. You know, we're talking about people with busy lives, busy work schedules, it's really important to try and find a way of doing the work where you're thinking flexibly about how you can either piggyback onto something that they're doing, maybe you can come to them, or maybe they would like to come to you because actually they don't have a proper office space, so it's nice to come to like the Leica building. So whatever works for them is helpful.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I sort of, if people couldn't come to me, I'd sit in public spaces. Then sometimes I would say, well, what would be better for you? And someone says, oh, well, I want to meet you in town. So I take all the stuff to town. So I made everything I use very, very portable. So the boxes you saw, some of them are quite heavy, but I had a huge suitcase with everything in it. And I could take that to a meeting room. I did one with Institute for Social Futures. Took it all around campus. I took it to Wales. It just really helps. Make whatever you're doing portable. And so you can bring the mountain to Mohammed.
Yeah.
Is that the right phrase?
I think so. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the next one was mine.
That's definitely yours.
Yeah, so, but I mean, it's just like it's something that people are naturally afraid of being asked to draw. They feel like they're being judged, and they may feel like they're being judged even just writing their thoughts down. So you want to make it as easy and comfortable for them, and to do it in a way that makes sense to them. So there are no rules, and people need to feel very welcomed and comfortable, and know that their data is not going to be like laughed at or disseminated to everybody, and that it's about the privacy and the kind of comfort of knowing that this stuff is kind of between, well, friends, researcher friends, and people that, it's just about creating that sort of idea of inclusivity, and it's actually a lot about the personality of the person running the study, which I think is so that's sort of a final point, but certain types of people find it easier to get out there and talk to people than others.
Yeah.
And if people are, there's something they want to do and they're having trouble, I mean, then I think something that helped for me was going to improv acting classes back in the day, and sadly John Whittle, who used to be head of Departmental Computing, is gone now, but he used to run sort of classes for people, like sort of getting them to sort of do acting stuff, which really gets you out of your comfort zone. So if people are interested in actually becoming more, getting out there and in your face, it really helps to sort of look at how you might engage with people as well as a researcher.
Oh, look, here's my pretend mouse. Sorry, just thinking of improv.
Okay, moving on.
Anyway, moving on, sorry. So, I mean, the next one, in some ways, qualifies number 3. So, yes, don't be afraid to get people to draw and express themselves in all sorts of visual ways, through all sorts of mediums, I should say. So that could be storytelling, photograph making, film making, and so on. But to qualify that, try to frame the blank space. There is nothing more terrifying, particularly to someone who hasn't had the privilege of 7 years plus of higher education in art and design. There is nothing more intimidating than a blank giant sheet. So sometimes kind of making that frame is smaller, maybe just with a post-it, or in any way that you can think of can help that process along and make it less intimidating, more accessible, more like something can be achieved, and that they can be loose and playful with it.
It's just as simple as just drawing a box on the piece of paper and saying put something in the box.
Yeah.
But the edge, having something on the paper really helps.
And the right question.
Yeah. So my first study was just blank bits of paper, and people were like, oh, the second study, the people found it a lot easier to engage with because there were actual tasks, actual boxes, and they'd be like, oh, do I have to fill out all the boxes? I'd be like, no, just fill out 2 or 3, just as long as your story makes sense. I don't mind how you do it, and but having boxes is brilliant. And post-it notes. People love post-it notes. Because once you put something on a post-it note, you feel like it's got a sort of distinct, discrete sort of piece of work that you can go, there, it's done.
Yeah.
So, whoever invented those must be making £1 million a day.
Oh, probably. That's what the M stands for in 3M, isn't it? Okay, so, so this one goes back then, I guess, this one goes back to what I was saying before about the fact that a tool does not replace skill. The skill has to still come from the person who is doing the engaging, and a tool then assists in that. So knowing and thinking carefully beforehand, thank you, about how and why you're using a tool before then thinking about the tool can be extremely helpful. Is extremely helpful, is the right order to think about things in.
Finally, it's a lot of hard work. Engagement work is loads of hard work. Workshops that it takes so much energy. Well, I feel that it does anyway. And but the payoff is worth it. You get so much out of getting those people and giving them a worthwhile experience, and it works two ways. You get something, they get something out of it.
That joint ownership.
And it was fun. Some of the feedback that I got was just like, even just about being happy to be drawing again, or being happy to be asked, and being part of something. Being part of something is important.
Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
May I just add to praising the work of Miriam, because I'm very well aware of their work. So I would like also to praise the work of Laura and Hayley, because Laura and Hayley helped us a lot in relation to the project that Nicola and I at the Department of Education and Research have been leading on, and trying to engage young people from two different schools in drawing comics, but basically, expressing their ideas about their views on the university and going to university, and how they can actually imagine themselves, and what it means for them to actually go to university. And some of those students, young people, would probably be the first generation to go to university. So basically, just a little background, the comic project is engaging, or has been engaging, students from two schools to produce a comic and express their engagement with literacy, and also improve their well-being. And then Laura and Hayley helped a lot on the day when the students visited the university, and they used the hexagon card.
Yeah.
And also the tool that it didn't show,
Storyboard.
but it's a very interesting tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's a storyboard for a comic creation, so that it's called the comic. Is it the comic
storyboard?
Yeah,
Storyboard.
storyboard.
Yeah.
Okay. So which actually that storyboard engaged the students to create little comics and actually imagine themselves as future students. So they were creating stories about their life as students, just imagining how it would be.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. Thank you so much. That was one of also the inspiration for me to invite all three of you. I mean, when I engaged with the project and then learned more about it, when I participated in your study, then I learned also about what Miriam has been doing and is continuing doing. So I just wanted to thank you again, all three of you, and also to let you know that it did have a great impact. And in the feedback that we got from the students, they all could imagine themselves going to university, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
All of them, without exception.
Yeah.
So well done, you. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I guess sort of on that, like, what's interesting about that is to go back to kind of what tools can do in terms of kind of folding in different actions. On the one hand, those tools, people were asked, like the young students that were asked to kind of think about a potential future of going to uni and what's the day in the life of being at university. But through doing that, they were also having to fold in some of their curriculum lessons around grammar and around constructing sentences, and so we managed to get a few cheeky points in with that. Although I must admit, I had to kind of like read over what the rules actually were. So wow, bearing in mind I speak this language, I have no idea.
And that was amazing, because basically they also took on board those curriculum targets. So we were liaising, and then I was sending them the curriculum targets from the teacher so that they can embed it in the activity, and they did it also brilliantly. So thank you.
Oh, very kind. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions?
I'll start with a question. Okay. I have used the hexagons. So
I remember.
I've used them in a variety of ways, so I found them very useful, and I think it is, as you say, about thinking about the context. I'd like to ask a question which has come up a little bit to do with supervising my own research students, and particularly around the drawing, and this was about sort of elicitation. And so it was something about what are the ethical issues in terms of asking people to write and create something. And we now sometimes see on the television, some scribble or doodle or sketch that some famous person has made, and now they're selling for millions. What are the issues for you as researchers in terms of how you get informed consent and all that sort of thing. One of my students is thinking of using this as an approach, and they work within a context where they'll be talking to art students. And so, in a sense, at their institution, they've talked very much about the fact that their artwork is their own copyright. So they're having to negotiate and think around those sorts of issues. I just wondered if and how that sort of set of debates features within your research and how you handled it, and any advice you might have for any of us who might seek to pursue it. How we get it through the ethics committee and all that sort of thing.
I can talk about for Leapfrog, or would you like to hear about
Well,
Miriam?
Well, I had some trouble with the first study because people coming to the shop, some of them were like, oh, well, if you make the idea, do I get the credit for it? And I was like, well, we're unlikely to actually make it. But then it actually opened up all these things. So the original ethics was signed off. But then one of the questions I presented at a conference, someone said, well, you know, what about these ideas? What if we now go and make them? What's the implication of that? So the professor said, well, actually, think of all this sort of open ideas and innovation. Open innovation shouldn't be about ownership of ideas and stuff, and it should all be free and wonderful. And then another perspective was, it's easy to have an idea like, I want to build a robot, and I've had the idea for a robot that makes tea. But then that's very easy to imagine a thing, but to actually build that thing and develop it and design it would be beyond the scope of the original idea. So unless the idea is so specific and groundbreaking that, you know, it could only be done from this idea, then then that has the issue of copyright and ownership. But if it's just a generic idea like, oh, what about a thing that does this? Then it's quite loose, so it's actually difficult to describe ownership in the first place. But to be on the safe side, the first paper, we said, well, you know, in this case, no one's going to be able to get the ideas. So we didn't release that data set as such. I mean, walking on the ceiling, I think maybe I would actually have to give ownership for that because it's very, very novel. But so that wasn't about building those things. That was about seeing the potential of the public to have the ideas. The more recent one was...
And about the actual drawings themselves?
The drawings themselves, no, I mean, I think they sign the form that says anything you produce might be used in a publication, which then gets copyrighted by ACM or IEEE or whoever's using it. So people are aware that we might use their pictures or a note, but everything's anonymised. So I think people are more concerned about being recognised than they are about having a doodle or something out there.
Yeah.
And I think or being recognised as having done a bad doodle. So if it's completely anonymous, people are happier. I mean, in terms of letting those things go. The more recent one, I mean, the one that Inez did is absolutely beautiful. And I've just kept it pristine. I don't know what to do with it. It's just I can't ever get rid of that. And it's just so, so lovely that she spent the time doing that. But I wouldn't feel really comfortable just giving that out to people because it's actually, to me, that is a work of art. Whereas other people where they've just made some scribbles or notes, I don't think they would have that sense. So I think it's about, I like to say about the artist. If I was an artist and I was giving data, I would want copyright. But I think most people maybe don't value their doodles in the same way that people who are self-described artists do, which is, it's a massive grey area. You have to make it very clear at the beginning that anything you do, say, draw is going to be used in research, but not for commercial gain. So, sorry, I waffled a bit.
No.
How does it work with you?
Well, so two things. The first is, like Miriam, we put together participant information and things to say very, very similar things that then get cleared by ethics ahead of time. But more, I guess, fundamentally than that, the approach with all of the tools that have been created through Leapfrog are licensed under Creative Commons. So I brought this up because you can just about see on the form that we've got the licensing there, and it means that it's totally and utterly under this particular Creative Commons license. It's completely free for people to do with as they wish, as long as there is some level. I think it's as long as there's some level of attribution that it's. I can't remember, but suffice to say, what that does is it means that people are made aware that when they are part of the co-design process and they're ideating, they're generating, they're drawing through that, they're creating stuff, that they know that's that is part of the project, and that the tools that come out are then theirs to do with as they wish, including making new adaptations of those tools that they might want to go on to reshare themselves. And the idea is that anything that they do on top of that remains Creative Commons, so that we're trying to encourage kind of, you know, free movement of knowledge, you know. So that's the so that's kind of, I guess that's how we've kind of got through the idea of IP.
So does that mean, Hayley, for example, if people, let's say colleagues here, want to use a tool from Leapfrog, what they need to do once they start talking about the method in an article, say, then they would need to attribute, you know, the copyright to Leapfrog. Is that
this is the bit I would need to double check. Yes, I don't think they would have to go in. They certainly wouldn't have to go into kind of a long spiel about, and so we're doing Leapfrog tool. I don't think that that's the case. And I'd have to double check quite what the license is, but I
had to do it for an article of mine where I used some tools. It's not Leapfrog tools, but they were created. I think it was the hexagons actually. And so all I did was footnote and say these tools were created by. This is the website, stuff like that. Yeah. And I think I did check that was the right thing to do.
Well, I would have thought that as a common courtesy, one would have acknowledgement of those thoughts that somebody else used.
Yeah, I mean, you can. The reason why I make that distinction is because under the Creative Commons licensing, there are different variations that you can utilise. Yeah.
But again, I suppose from us as researchers, you would want to perhaps acknowledge the work that others have done, even if you're not being required to signal that this wasn't.
It's hard when people have to be anonymous. Because some things you like, so if I put in this picture in my paper, I can't say who it is.
Oh, no.
But it's difficult. So if your artists are creating stuff that you want to publish in an anonymous way, I guess they might have an issue with that.
Yeah.
But if you can name your artists in the papers, I think they would be much happier. So it's really, it's very hard in user studies, but in more open-ended design processes, I think you can be a little looser about acknowledgement.
Yeah, I mean, we've got one of the first things that was completed in the project was an ethics policy that we share with everybody. We share with all the partners that we work with, that says that says very clearly your stuff will be anonymised as default and is stored securely and so on and so forth. But if there are kind of particularly, juicy things in terms of either images or a quote that you said or something like that, that we would ideally want to publish, that we would seek their permission first. Of course, if they said no, then we can't do it. But that we've kind of left that door open, because so much of kind of communicating co-design process, things like this, is sort of having examples that bring it to life, and to understand, well, what really goes on inside of these processes. It's something that we talk about and are writing about.
Others will have questions, but I just want to pick up and just clarify so nobody leaves the room thinking. When I was stressing that I thought one ought to perhaps acknowledge, it was the acknowledgement of the tool as opposed to the content that somebody put in the actual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just to comment, first I really enjoyed your style, enthusiasm, and fun, and I think academia needs more of that. That's great.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Fun, and ownership, so I can see the meaning for you and the work you've done, but it's really a great pleasure to see that. Thank you. And what I really enjoyed was I've seen concerns about social justice and access and engagement, and although I think of position computing and design, it is so social, your process and your research. I think it's really great to see this interdisciplinarity coming. My topic is evaluation practice, and as you said, something really, really similar. Just what to know is it's not only because we ask or tell people to do this, and the tool that will do. So I've brought the quality of petition engagement, of how people resist, they are forced in that collaboration evaluation, because of course they can't see the meaning, they don't know how to enjoy it, and they might have the skill they don't have the right to. So thank you for a lot of ideas to.
also do have a question though. It was very refreshing. I'm teaching on a program called Technology Next Learning. And when it comes to tool, I'm always thinking about digital tools nowadays. And it's so much refreshing to see all those paper and all this, just not have this phone related. And I think I can certainly use it with my online students. So it was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
We have done digital tools before on previous projects, which we didn't talk about because Leapfrog's been more physical tools. But on Ideas for Impact, we did have a programmer who was working with us, and we did do some stuff on iPads, so it was quite interesting. But the problem that we had, and actually we did use it with the young people when they came and did the residential, but it slightly failed. I mean, it did part of what it was meant to, but then there was a problem, and then we ended up printing off the digital tool and laying it out to use it, so that's the problem with digital tools. So it's interesting.
Also, it's easier to destroy, or the paper thing, you can burn that. Whereas data is really difficult to really make anything secure these days. So and there's something immediate about sketching or making notes straight onto paper, and you feel I find it a lot easier. I mean, some people love drawing on Procreate and iPads, but to actually just get a Sharpie and write something on a post-it is just an action. It's like you've put something out there. It's not just I don't know, by containing it in a screen, I think you don't get as much freedom to think outside of the box or screen.
But it's also, I mean, in the example of your work, if you're thinking about shape-shifting technology, there could have been every justification for having something that was highly digital that people interacted with, but you made a very clear decision to do something that was physical, that people could physically interact with, and they were really fun as well. I really enjoyed it, but it's about it's about thinking carefully about whether a digital interaction is really going to help you in the moment, and actually if something physical and low tech is actually going to take you further.
This is really interesting because it made me think about a lot of things. Start with Miriam's experiment, let's put it that way, and would first engage participants with touching different objects to feel how different shapes are made and how they feel, and then that would be an introduction, and it really made me very, very enthusiastic about these different
people just leaving their hands on things
and different feel actually when you engage with these shapes, and that actually I think enthused everyone to just proceed and what's coming next, and I think we do need something more creative in research, something more exciting, something to enthuse people. And so I think you're definitely doing some great work, and probably it could be also called a pioneering work in maybe more traditional research circles. And I think hopefully there will be more of such creative tools entering more traditional kind of spaces and minds, if that is the word. And also that reminded me of, are you aware of any tools that would engage, for example, people who are visually impaired, or with any particular what we now call disabilities, but I'm more and more kind of uncomfortable with this.
Well, interesting. Matt, who you're sat next to, I think you've been doing with some of the stuff that you did with Beaumont. Yeah. With Beaumont College, was that kind of linked to? Was any of that for people who had visual impairments as well?
Well, Beaumont College has about 100 students there, mostly cerebral palsy, but a lot of them have visual impairment. As one of the side effects, cerebral palsy is a complex condition. Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of them do have visual impairment, so you have to think about the colour of any interactions that you design.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry, I totally
I was thinking about that because I think the tools are brilliant, so that you can see that there is a lot of tactile thing going on. So probably, and you can combine that, for example, with the Moore's technique, or with your shapes, that can also suggest something. I think we're just at the beginning probably of breaking through, because you know that I share your enthusiasm for creative and visual methods, and we do have also students who might have visual impairment, and students who also work with people who do have some sort of either visual impairment or disability, and they're very keen to understand what can be done for that community.
Well, actually, I was reading a psychology paper looking about how the visual and tactile sort of senses are linked in the brain. And so there's looking at people tracing raised lines and things like that. And I mean, that's something that actually shape-changing interface would be great for, is that they're giving you that multimodal experience. And so you can interact with your tablet or whatever it is in a very, very physical and tangible way. So that's one of the outputs that people were very keen on seeing. They thought about the potential for, like, say, raised haptic interfaces, so they can read Braille or they can feel faces remotely, say on Skype or something like that. I mean, the potential for that is amazing. I think the best thing I heard recently as a researcher in computing said it's not her quote, but she says you design for the least able population, then it will work for everyone. Which I thought was important.
I'm aware of the time. Thank you so much. Rebecca, do we have any questions from our online students? Thank you. So, brilliant. Okay, so thank you so much for coming, everyone, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
That was really fascinating. And I would like just to announce our next seminar, which will be on Wednesday, the 15th of November, and our presenters will be our colleagues from Education Research, Paul Ashwin, Janja Komnenovic, and Jan MacArthur, and they will be talking about does it matter what you study? Thank you.
Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.